Okay, guys, again, welcome to The Purpose of This Book with David G. and David G. Very excited tonight. We're starting a new chapter. We are up to chapter 7, Working with Others, right at the top of page 89. And David, we didn't even talk about this. You want to recap anything, or you want to just jump in, or
I think let me read the 12th step on page 60.
great?
Let me just read right out of the book. So, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, that to me is one of the greatest promises in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. If I do this work honestly and thoroughly, I'll have a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, this course of action that we took. And then the charge for that is right with this chapter we're in right now, chapter 7, Working with Others. In the 12th step on page 60, he says, we try to carry this message to alcoholics. That is the charge for having the spiritual awakening. It's not an option, it's an obligation that I get to have to carry this message. And then the challenge here, and they're not going to really address it in this chapter, we'll address it in the following 3 chapters after that. We'll get to that, to practice these principles in all our affairs. So that leads us right into chapter 7 tonight, Working with Others.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's worth, just before we dive in here too, just to add, if you recall, if you were with us last week, or if you weren't, the closing paragraph of the preceding chapter ends with this short paragraph. But this is not all. There's action and more action. Faith without works is dead. The next chapter is entirely devoted to step 12, which I think segues beautiful into how this chapter then begins. So, chapter 7, Working with Others. Practical experience shows that nothing will so much ensure immunity from drinking as intensive work with other alcoholics. It works when other activities fail. This is our 12th suggestion. Carry this message to other alcoholics. You can help when no one else can. You can secure their confidence when others fail. Remember, they are very ill. Oh, I need to make Ashton a co-host so Ash can come in with any words. Okay. Anything in that chapter, Ash?
Yeah, I have the definition for immunity, which means freedom.
How about a medical? Could you find us one given your medical background for immunity? That might be a good one to do both ways.
Yeah, let me grab that one.
Super. Go ahead, David. Get us
Okay.
started.
Okay, so practical. So is it practical? Here's a question. Like, we like to take statements in the big book and turn them into questions. So is this practical for me when I walk out of a meeting? When I'm walking around and I'm not around the fellowship, can I practice take this experience that I've had, this awakening, into my daily life? So my life is not segmented into different areas any longer. I have a relationship with power. And what it's talking about there is practical experience, not a theory, an actual experience I've had with the work, with a higher power, with others. Others means relationship with the fellowship, with the steps, with service, with the 3 sides of the triangle here. And it shows that nothing will so much ensure immunity. And I think immunity means, we're talking about here is a defense. Like, I have a defense against this, because nothing will so much ensure immunity from drinking with intensive work. So intensive, how does that work for me? That means one-on-one work. That means eyeball to eyeball with the new guy sitting across. And along with that is there's an approach reference there, meaning there's a lot of approach references in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and we're looking for them all the time, because this is not about me waiting for the new guy to come to me. I'm armed with the facts about myself. I'm armed with the facts about the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous and the steps. I should be seeking out, and that we'll get to it in a minute. I'm going to go back. We're going to bounce around the book a little bit tonight. We're going to go back into the text a little bit and point out the references that Bill's talking about here in these paragraphs that we're addressing. So this one-on-one is intensive work with other alcoholics. So Howard Ebert talks about this all the time, the window of opportunity. We don't know what that looks like and how fast that window is going to shut. So I got to work quickly with the new person, but intensively enough to get them through the work quickly so they can have a relationship with power, and not to be so dependent upon a relationship with the human power, me, but having a relationship with God. But then I can take my time and go real intensive with that person, one-on-one. And I do this with a lot, all my sponsees, is word for word to the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And then it says it works when other activities fail. Well, that is a promise in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Another promise. It works when other activities fail. And this is our 12th suggestion in italic writing. So if you listen to Joe and Charlie ever, italic writing is very important. It was very expensive to put in the Big Book when the Big Book was put together and being published. So pay attention to it as though a neon sign. And then it says, we carry this message to alcoholics. Again, another approach reference. That is me approaching the newcomer and asking them, would they be, first of all, qualifying them? I could go to top of page 44 and ask them, once they take a drink, can they manage the amount that they drink when they put it in their body? So in other words, can you stop abruptly? And if they say no, then say, when you stop, can you stay stopped? The book asks us these questions. And then the answer to that is, well, then you're probably alcoholic. So if you are, would you be interested in me taking you through this work? That's what I will do all the time with new people here. And then we can help when no one else can. So let's go to the bottom of page 17, I believe it is, in the third paragraph. You guys want to bounce around? You don't have to follow me necessarily, but it talks about why can we do this? And we're talking about being shipwrecked. And this page 17 is chapter 2. There's a solution. So on the bottom, the last paragraph on page 17 in the third paragraph, it says the tremendous fact, not a theory, a fact for every one of us is that we have discovered a common solution, the program of action here. We have a way out by which we can absolutely agree and upon which we can join in brotherly and harmonious action. This is the key word here. This whole chapter is about action. This is the great news this book carries of those who suffer from alcoholism. So I am bringing great news out of the text of Alcoholics Anonymous to the new person who's still suffering, because what it is, I know what the problem is and I know what the solution is. And that's exactly what Bill brought to Dr. Bob. He had talked to Silkworth about, that he was trying to rip people off of bar stools and going to treatment centers and going to asylums and ripping people out of beds and talking about the spiritual nature of this whole thing. And it didn't work. And Silky told him, he says, hey, why don't you tell him what the problem is? Talk about the problem. Like, once you put alcohol in your body, you can't control the amount that you drink. And once you stop, you can't stay stopped. So I'm armed with the facts about that because I've studied the chapters up to this point so that he can relate to me. So knowing the problem would not be enough for me to help another person. I also have to know what the solution is. And that's what this great news of this book carries to us. Then it says, you can win their confidence when others fail. So on the bottom of page 18, told you I was going to bounce around a little bit.
More italics.
More italics. In the italics, fourth paragraph. Again, Joe and Charlie, pay attention to italics. Very important. Neon sign. But the ex-problem drinker who has found the solution, so that we're talking about the sober alcoholic who has found the solution, who is properly armed with the facts about himself, can generally win the entire confidence of another alcoholic in a few hours. This is a great description of what a sponsor working with a sponsor looks like. And until such an understanding is reached, little or nothing can be accomplished. So those are approach references there also. Then the next paragraph, just so this is kind of a good way to look at what a sponsor looks like. The man who is making the approach has had the same difficulty, that he obviously knows what he's talking about, that his whole deportment shouts at the new prospect that he's a man with a real answer, solution of living solution, that he has no attitude of holier than thou, nothing whatever except the sincere desire to be helpful. There are no dues or fees to pay, no axes to grind, no people to please, no lectures to be endured. These are the conditions we have found most effective. And after such an approach, many take up their beds and walk again, meaning they get recovered. So I am armed with the facts about myself. My obligation is to carry this message, to approach the new person in a meeting. And the last thing I want to say about that here is the last thing it says, remember, they are very, very ill of spirit, mind, body, and spirit. But the last point I want to make here is I never go to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous, or any anonymous meeting without my big book in hand. I'm going to need that big book, and I keep an extra one in my truck so I can give that new person a big book before they leave that night.
Thanks, David. Yeah, let's make sure we're clear on some of the language here. And I love, this is definitely one of my favorite sentences in the entire book. So practical experience shows. So practical, when we're talking about the word, what does practical mean? Practical experience. We're talking about practical has to do as an adjective meaning like actual, not theoretical, not conceptual, right? Practical experience. So what the authors, Bill and the first 100 are saying is our actual experience demonstrates, shows that nothing, right? They're being a little absolute here. Nothing will so much ensure immunity from drinking as intensive work with other alcoholics. So there is no one thing I'm being told in this sentence that's going to keep me from drinking more than intensively working with other alcoholics. But if you've been studying with us, or if you haven't been studying with us, because I know there's a bunch of new people here tonight too, but hopefully you've studied the book prior to this, alcohol, cocaine, overeating, cutting, sex, spending, whatever it is, those are problems. Those are significant problems. But what's my real problem? My real problem is the unmanageability of my life, my spiritual malady, my spiritual illness. Because I'll put that alcohol down and I'll pick that cocaine up. I'll put that cocaine down and I'll pick up the womanizing. I'll put the womanizing down and I'll have those credit cards run up, right? My spiritual malady is running rampant. So nothing will so much ensure immunity from me living an unmanageable life as intensive work with other alcoholics. And by the way, the intensive work, I was just in a meeting the other day. David and I were there as our CA home group on Monday night. And we were talking about, the topic was overcoming fear. And there's a bunch of new people there and they're doing their best, but they were all chiming in and talking about tactics and things that they do to overcome fear. And 6 or 7 different people talked about, man, when things are bad, I call my sponsor. Not one of them said when things are bad, I call a newcomer, right? This intensive work with other alcoholics, with other addicts, whatever your fellowship you're in, this is about what I'm going to do intensive work to help somebody else. Not that I'm going to go to my sponsor. Listen, of course, go to your sponsor, use your sponsor. But when in crisis, I get better by getting out of myself. I don't really get out of myself by going to my sponsor. When I go to my sponsor, I'm talking about me. When I go to intensively work with a struggling alcoholic, I am talking about them. I got to be in service. That's what gives me that extra coating of the spiritual armor, right? And some of my sponsees, I don't have any of them here tonight, but they know well, and they will call me and they will start talking my ear off about some problem. And 10 seconds in, I'm like, did you call a newcomer yet? And they always say no. I say, call a newcomer and then let me know if you still need to talk. 99 times out of 100, they'll just send me a text back in a half an hour and be like, I'm good. It's amazing how quickly we can get out of self when we do what? When we get out of self, right? It's fairly simple. So it works when other activities fail. So I like what Bill's saying here too. What Bill is saying is that for most of us, we tried many other ways to straighten out our lives, to quit drinking, quit drugging before we came into, a 12-step fellowship. But what I believe Bill is suggesting here when he's saying it works when other activities fail, is he's suggesting that even in recovery, I can try to do other things instead of my primary purpose, right? Which is to serve God and help other people. I can try to engage in other activities. And so Bill's reminding me saying, do whatever you want, but when you're still feeling lousy, you think you're a threat to drink, get into the wet work, help someone who's struggling. This is our 12th suggestion. Carry this message to other alcoholics. What message am I supposed to carry? It's not a rhetorical question. Everybody should be going like this. Oh, right? This message, not my message. David will say, what's my message? Well, it's a little bit of the big book. It's a little bit of the 12 and 12. Now it's a little bit of the service manual. We've been studying that, and a whole lot of my opinion. That's my message, and my message could kill somebody. This message saves lives. right? This thing is filled with mechanics and miracles, best of all worlds. So I got to carry this message to other alcoholics. And what is the message in short? It's that if you've got the same problem as I do, if you have a step one problem, right, that you're powerless over alcohol and your life's unmanageable, right? The message is that you can have a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, the singular result of these steps. Right? And you can help when no one else can. We read about this multiple times in the book, right? Dr. Silkworth talks about this in The Doctor's Opinion, and it comes up liberally other times. Human reliance fails us. People have tried to help us. We've tried to get help from people, right? From our spouses, our children, our doctors, our lawyers, our judges, the cops, employers. Humans can't help us, guys, right? Humans can't help us. Humans can't help the other struggling alcoholic, but we can, because we can secure their confidence when others fail. David always took us to page 18. And then remember, they are very ill. And I'm really glad they read that we read that tonight, because that is something that I need to be reminded of. I forget that. I for one, when I'm talking to a newcomer and they're like, "Oh man, I'll do anything. Just give me direction. Please sponsor me. Please help me." I'll be like, "Great, meet me at a meeting an hour." Well, I can't do that. And I'm like, "I thought you were willing to go to any length." Well, yeah, right. But I forget that they're very ill. The problem with being clean and sober for over 20 years is I forget what it feels like to be 20 minutes or 20 hours or 20 days sober. But that's why I have to keep working with newcomers too, because when I'm working with that new guy and he's all messed up and he's got that nervous energy, it does help me remember this guy's still sick.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that little last sentence there too. Remember, they're very ill, because so if I've done this work, and I have done this work 1 through 9, and then I live in the disciplines of 10 and 11 and 12, and then on page 85, at the end of the promises, it says, "This is how we react so long as we stay in fit spiritual condition." That is my job. That's my responsibility to stay in fit spiritual condition. It's not God's. Yes, I have a relationship with power today. It's available to me. I have access to it, but it's not his job to keep me in fit spiritual condition. I have these tools available to me. So yeah, not one size fits all when I work with other people. Like sometimes I sponsor a few people on this call tonight, and it just depends on when I pray, God comes to me. And whenever 2 or more of us are gathered together, he is present. He's always present. He's closer to my breath. And then I present out of the book. And the reason why I present out of the book is because the message in the fellowship isn't always the message out of the big book. Would you agree? I mean, I'm just saying, a lot of times you hear silly things in the meetings. It's like, don't drink no matter what. Well, thank you very much. I wish I would have thought about that. I wouldn't have to be here tonight, no matter what. It's like, no, this does not work like that for me. I am a very sick person, and David's point is so valid. After a few 24 hours without picking up a drink or drug, I have forgotten what it's like. And what happens with a new guy, in my experience, is their outside world starts to get a little bit better. They're welcome back to work. They get past the court date. They make the bedroom crossing with mama, perhaps, and I'm just saying. And then their outside world gets better, but this is an inside job. And it's an inside problem with an inside solution. And when my insides get better, then my outsides get better, because that's short-lived. That external problem, that's short-lived. And I will pick up a drink again in my own power today. And one last thing I want to point out here, and how important this is. Bill is having a dramatic writing style change here on this page. He is no longer using the word you is used 14 times on this page. You. So we're not using the word we and us any longer. Bill's taking the fingers, turning them around, and pointing it at us. It's our responsibility to carry what message did David just say? This message out of the 174 pages out of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous.
And I just wanted to repeat one quick thing too. David mentioned these pretty swiftly, but I know people like to mark these. So here's how I think David and I both have them marked in our books. So the first sentence, right, the practical experience shows, mark that as a promise. You like to mark such things. And then it works when other activities fail. I've got that marked as a fact. And then you can help when no one else can. You can secure their confidence when others fail. I also have that marked as a fact. Okay. Moving on. Life will take on new meaning. To watch people recover, to see them help others, to watch loneliness vanish, to see a fellowship grow up about you, to have a host of friends. This is an experience you must not miss. We know you will not want to miss it. Frequent contact with newcomers and with each other is the bright spot of our lives. Ash, nothing? Okay, go ahead, David.
Okay, so I'm gonna get up in a lather right now because this is exciting stuff, guys. This is we get to carry this message. I'm not in the result business. I'm just a messenger here. You're responsible for the work. I can't want your recovery more than you do, right? But a lot of times I do. A lot of times I really, really do, because I can see the path. I'm on the path. I am not the path. I am just the light shining on the path. I am not the light. I'm just the lantern. God is the lantern. I'm part of the light. But life will take on and I circle the word new meaning. I've never experienced this before. Never had this experience. It's a new meaning, new emotion, new feeling, new everything. And then I get to watch people recover. Past tense. They've done the work. They've recovered from a hopeless state of mind and body. They recover. And then what do they do in return? This is kind of a direction here to see them help others, to watch loneliness disappear, vanish. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to rewrite the big book there. To see a fellowship grow up about you, to have a host of friends. This is an experience you must not miss. Please circle the word must. There's 139 of them. If you study with Howard and Kathy on Sundays, they counted up to 139. I like to use the cheater's way about things. Someone else counted 139. I'm going to say it until someone else corrects me. It's 139, right? Up to this point. But to watch loneliness vanish, to see a fellowship grow up about you. I don't know about you, but I thought about taking my own life many, many, many times before I got sober. I just didn't have the courage to do it. And I don't know why. But I used to think, man, who's going to show up at my funeral? This is how I thought about myself. Like, okay, this is me. I don't think too little of myself, too much of myself. All I do is think of myself. This is why selfishness and self-centeredness must be smashed over and over and over again. But I used to think no one would show up at my funeral, including my family, my kids, or my wife. I don't think they would even show up. Today, dude, I have a vision for what that looks like. Like hundreds of people showing up at my funeral, like for the viewing, right, Bert? For the viewing. How you doing today, Bert? For the viewing. So to watch people recover, to see them help others, to watch loneliness vanish, to see a fellowship grow about you, to have a host of friends, this is an experience you must not miss. If you do this work, you will not miss this. If you fill out the equilateral triangle, if you do the basic recovery, and Charlie Parker used to do this with his sponsees, let's do a circle and triangle check-in. Where are you at in the base of the triangle? Where are you at in the steps right now? Are you working on, are you in 10, 11, and 12? Yeah, I am. Okay, where are you at in the unity part of this triangle? Well, I'm going to a couple meetings a week. I'm kind of busy. I don't really have a whole lot of time. So you're kind of like half doing it, right? How about service part? You got doing anything, your home group, sponsor anybody? Well, I don't have time for that. Oh, so you have an unequal triangle. You don't have an equilateral triangle. So let's find out what's going on here. So that's a good check-in for me. I like to do that with my sponsees from time to time. But if you do this work, you'll watch loneliness vanish and see a fellowship grow up about you. They have a host of new friends. I have so many friends on my phone. I have so many friends on Zoom because of the pandemic. Yeah. Right? David always brings this up whenever he does a talk. I mean, now we have like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of friends, and I'm not exaggerating. Like someday we're going to really pull this off, because Paul pulled this off and he came to the United States and he came and spent time with us. We got to return that favor and come to the UK. We got to go to Thailand and go see Tony and the guys. This is the plan. Maybe when I retire in a few years, that's my plan. I already told my wife this is what we're doing, and she's like, "Okay, that'd be fun." So, anyways, you will back to the text. We know you will not want to miss it. Why would I not want to miss that? Because I am in the trenches. Like, let's all get in the trenches together. Get on the firing lines of carrying this message. This is something so exciting. This is not my vocation. Obviously, it's not. The book talks about it. It's my avocation. But man, on page 97, it talks about 12 inconveniences. If I'm not being inconvenienced, I'm probably not doing enough work in Alcoholics Anonymous or Cocaine Anonymous or OA or whatever, DA or whatever. I need to be inconvenienced. And I sponsor double-digit guys, and not to pat me on the back. I'm just saying, I'm always trying to stay involved, and somehow it balances out. It's almost like God says, I know everybody else has got 24 hours a day, David. You're my favorite. I'm going to give you a couple extra minutes every day to do this work. Just saying. Maybe it is, maybe it doesn't. That's just I don't think too little of myself, too much of myself. So all I do is think of myself. It says, you will not want to miss it. Frequent contact with newcomers and with each other is the bright spot of our lives. What does that look like? Where am I going to find newcomers at? See, we don't have to go to hospitals necessarily today. Yes, please go to treatment centers and jails and prisons and carry this message. Absolutely, I need to do that. And David and I do that. But perhaps the easiest, softer way is just to go to meetings and to find them people. You know, it talks about, and let's find out what it looks like in Bill's story, by the way. Let's go back to page 15 in the second paragraph. I'll give you a second to get there if you want. It's a lengthy paragraph. Bill likes to have a lot of run-on sentences and some very lengthy paragraphs. That's okay. So do I. So page 15, second paragraph. We commence to make many fast friends. A fellowship has grown up among us, of which it is a wonderful thing to feel a part. Agreed? I never felt a part of anything in my entire life. Unless I was drinking with you, and after a while I isolated. There was no fun in that at all. Back to the text. The joy of living we really have, even under pressure and difficulty. So we're going to have trials and low spots in life, even though that page 14, we just on the bottom of the prior page on the top of 15, these things are going to happen in our life. The joy of living we really have, even under pressure and difficulty. I have seen hundreds of families set their feet in the path that really goes somewhere. Have seen the most impossible domestic situations rightened. Feuds and bitterness of all sorts wiped out. I've seen men come out of asylums and resume a vital place in their lives of their families and communities. I've had these experiences, guys. Businesses and professional men have regained their standing. There is scarcely any form of trouble or misery which has not been overcome among us, together, shoulder to shoulder, with the power of God in my life. In one Western city and its environs, which means surroundings, there are 1,000 of us in our families. Remember, this is published back in the late 30s. We meet frequently so that newcomers may find the fellowship they seek. This is where we're going to find newcomers. At these informal gatherings, one may often see from 50 to 200 persons. And at this particular meeting, 37. We are growing in numbers and power. Let's get on the front lines. Let's get in the trenches. Let's carry this message and watch. David has a math thing. Go to one of his talks on Zoom.
I'm going to do it right after this.
Okay, you got to do it, dude. It's phenomenal. Okay, that's it, bro.
All right. So I was thinking as we were reading this paragraph, and as David was taking us, up into the stratosphere. Why do we do this? Why do we work with others? Why do we carry this message? Like David already said, we are obliged to do so. So what is, I know what our common experience is. I feel quite certain you guys had the same experience that I did, which is that I came in, broken and busted and defeated and still not fully convinced, but, not in great shape. And I came looking for help. I was incapable of offering much to anyone. So I needed to take from you guys. And you guys gave. I came in with a very empty spiritual mug, right? There was nothing in there. And you guys filled it up and you filled it up and you filled it up until my spiritual mug was full. And by the time it got full, then you guys said, oh, no. Pour that thing back out. Pour it out. To who? To the new people who needed the help, right? And so here's my greatest, I'm trying to think of the appropriate noun. Here's what drives me the most nuts. I'll say it this way. So we'll talk about Alcoholics Anonymous for a second. If you go on AA.org, you'll see that according to the last AA census, roughly 2 million members worldwide. And if you look back, the censuses every few years for the past 3.5 decades, plus or minus 10%. Our worldwide membership is 2 million people. It basically has been plateauing for 3.5 decades. Now, we know Alcoholics Anonymous is the original 12-step fellowship. It's the biggest one. If we took a look at all the other 12-step fellowships combined, I would, if I had to hazard a guess, maybe the total population is about another 2 million. But I'll be generous. Let's say Alcoholics Anonymous number is a little low, and let's say all the other fellowships have more people than I think. Let's say there's 10 million of us in 12-step recovery, right? Does that seem like a lot? I'm going to answer this question for you. No, it does not. There are 8 billion people on this planet, 8 billion with a B. 10% of us, by the data, are alcoholics or addicts of some degree. 800 million people need our help. There's 10 million of us, maybe, generously. You guys see the problem here? We're 490 million people short. So I started getting into this mental exercise a few years ago, thinking about how can we get more people? How can we help more people? How can we save more lives? So I started playing with the math because I'm like, okay, well, what am I supposed to do? I'm supposed to get in here, understand, some things in steps 1, 2, and 3. Then I'm supposed to do some work in 4 through 9 and get recovered. And then I'm supposed to grow in effectiveness and understanding 10, 11, and 12. And as I'm doing that, I'm carrying this message. I'm working with other people. So it occurred to me, what if over the course of my entire recovery, and again, I've been doing this about 20 and a half years now, continuously clean and sober. David he's in his 25th year. We got people here. We got Shelly with us tonight, 53 years sober. Isn't that incredible? A lot of us been doing this a long time. So over the course of my entire recovery, let's say just 3 people, I effectively got through the work, helped get them to God. They had a spiritual awakening and they're on a new path. And then let's say over the course of their entire recovery, they only helped 3. And I'm saying only 3 because 20 years I've sponsored, I don't know, probably 100 men. I don't know, right? And a handful of women, a lot of people. But if I only did 3, and each of those sponsees only effectively sponsored 3 people and got them to God and they stayed. And each of them only helped 3. So you guys remember from grade school math, exponents. So it's just like 3 to the 15th power, which is 3 times 3 times 3, which means all of us only help 3 people effectively. Starting from me, 3 to the 15th power, so 15 generations down the line from me, is 14,348,907 people. So starting from me and my lineage, the sponsees and their sponsees and their sponsees, there ought to be 14,348,907 of us, right? But we got to help 490 million more people. Well, fortunately, I'm not the only one in this program recovery. There's 40 people in the meeting now. So we go 14,348,907 times 40. We solve the problem with margin for error. 573,956,280 people. I am not making this up, guys. When we're done, because you won't believe me, some of you will be skeptical. Go on Google and say, what is 3 to the 15th power? You're going to see 14,348,907. Then multiply it by the 40 of us here tonight. 573, almost 574 million. The reason why I do this exercise and I get so invigorated by it, guys, is you have to understand that today, and especially through the power of Zoom, where we literally have no borders, or very few borders, right? We may not be able to help some people in China or North Korea, but those are the exceptions, not the rule. We have very few borders to reach out and connect. The 40 people in this meeting tonight could help every addict, alcoholic, compulsive, you name it, that needs a 12-step recovery. We could carry the message. We could help get them to God and save their lives. This is why we have the 12-step. This is why it's an obligation. This is why it's not an option. If I come in and I get better and my external circumstances got better, like David talked about, like, I'm physically sober, ain't it grand, the wind stopped blowing, and I'm back in the bed, and I'm back on the job, and my health is better. And I'm like, well, I got what I needed. Have I gotten rid of the root of my problems, which is selfishness? No. How am I really going to be feeling inside? Some of you guys probably know. Some of you guys have probably been through this phase when you were only physically sober, right? This is not about physical sobriety. That is not what this book is about. This is one of the challenges we have when we even talk about clean time, right? Because if I talk about I haven't drank in 20 years, 6 months, 3 days, whatever it is, that's a celebration of the fact that I stopped drinking. This is about recovery. This is about life changing. A wonderful byproduct of my spiritual awakening is that I won't drink or drug anymore, that problem is going to be removed. But that's not the purpose, right? The purpose is to fit myself to be a maximum service to God and all his kids, all 8 billion of his kids, and especially the 800 million that have the same powerlessness issue that I do.
Yeah, and so maybe the fear is that I don't know how to carry this message. I got the big book in front of me, and maybe I haven't studied enough. David and I had the same experience a few 24 hours ago. What did I do? Today I am a teacher. I take guys through the work quickly, and then I take them back through it slowly. And now I'm about ready to start a new avenue of traditions with a bunch of sponsees. And David and I are doing the World Service Manual right now. But I also got to be a student. I study with Howard and Kathy on Sundays. You know what I did this past week? I went back and plugged in some old Mark Houston stuff. Agent of God. It was phenomenal. I listened to everything Mark has ever done. Katie Parker just posted something on. They just part of one of her talks was a 10-step on Mad Dog. And I listen to her. I love her too. And then I listen to Joe Hawk. And I listen to Herb K. And I'm always invested in trying to get better and carrying this message so I have a better understanding of what this message really is and how it's going to affect my life, and then watch a fellowship grow up about me, because they're going to start carrying the message to other people. And then all of a sudden we have a fellowship and watch their life change, watch God come into their life and change every aspect of their life. And again, what I said earlier on, it's like, do the work 1 through 9. Live in the disciplines of 10, 11, and 12. Live in those disciplines all day long. Live in them things, and then carry this message. Stay involved here all the time, because like what I talked about here on the bottom of page 85, and the last part of the promises is, it says that this is how we react so long we stay in fit spiritual condition. That's my responsibility to stay in fit spiritual condition, not God's. I have a relationship with that power, but it's mine. And how can I best do this? Working with others, getting outside of self. And as David pointed out on page 77, what is my purpose? I have a purpose. This is the best news I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah.
To be of maximum service to God and all the people about me. That is a great purpose. I actually put my head on the pillow at night and think, this is amazing. After I've taken my love of stuff in the evening review, of course, don't miss that. Got to do that. Got to do all the work here. I don't get to skip on anything here. It's an amazing program. Amazing.
So just breaking down this paragraph a little more, since I went into my rant on exponents, life will take on new meaning. Mark that as a promise, guys. Life doesn't take on new meaning for me just because I got physically sober. One of the great tragedies, too, of 12-step recovery is where people don't have greater hope to see beyond their present circumstances. They stop drinking, they stop drugging, they stop cutting, they stop whatever they're powerless over, but that all of the thoughts in their head and the feelings in their heart and the attitudes in their guts, those things are still all screwed up 6 ways from Sunday. We need to aspire for more. We are to serve more, like Dave and I are both talking about. I want my life to take on new meaning. Just not drinking, that's not new meaning. That's okay. The plug's in the jug somehow. That's not why God wants to save my life. He wants to save my life to give me an entire new experience so I can be of service, to watch people recover, to see them help others, to watch loneliness vanish, to see a fellowship grow up about you, to have a host of friends. This is an experience you must not miss, right? I can't believe there's no exclamation at the end of that. I feel like Bill should be shouting that gospel at us, and we ought not miss that. But if I do the bare minimums, right? If I'm not thorough and I'm not honest and I cut corners and I stay in the gray in my 12 steps and I don't really get into service, if I'm too busy, I'm not going to get to experience all this joy. And by the way, this is lunacy to the newcomer. To me, coming in, this doesn't compute. I'd be like, what are you talking about? Why do I care about any of this stuff? This sounds like torture. Why do I care about helping and being people and helping you guys and watching you succeed? That was foreign to me. You know why it was foreign to me? Because it didn't have enough to do about me. It's all about you guys. I want to hear about what's in it for me. Right? That is the self. That's what I'm plagued by. That is what is eating me up from my belly button outward. We know you will not want to miss it. Well, hopefully by this point in the book, in this point in my first journey through the steps, hopefully that's a true statement, and that feels right. Frequent contact with newcomers and with each other is the bright spot of our lives. Man, it ought to be. Can it be hard sometimes? Yeah, of course it can, right? Because sometimes I want to sink into my self hole. Yeah, of course. Because sometimes the sponsees call me and I'm like, oh, God damn it, right? I don't, oh, sorry, David. I'm trying not to take the Lord's name in vain. David's been holding me accountable for that. Darn it, I don't want to answer the phone. Sure, sometimes I want to drift into self, right? That's okay. It's okay. I can't sit in there. I need to identify it, and I need to pray to God to make me an ever better, more giving person, right? None of us are perfect. But I can tell you, on the whole, this is a very true statement. The frequent contact with newcomers and with each other is a bright spot of our lives. David brought it up here, and I do say this almost every time I give a main share. I say, God bless the pandemic, because we met each other. David and I are out here in the cornfields of Illinois, and we went out here thumping the big book for a long time. We've known each other, and we're like, man, where are all the other people that want to thump the big book with us? And we found a few of them. We got Ashton and Abby and, a few of our sponsees, but we didn't find enough. And then we got on Zoom in the pandemic and we're like, oh, found you guys, like brothers and sisters in the book, right? And so it's just wonderful now that we can do this face-to-face, in person, but also face-to-face over Zoom. What a blessing. What a blessing. Mm-hmm. Maybe the pandemic had to happen for we recovering alcoholics and addicts. What a fantastic thought. Let's carry on. Third paragraph. Perhaps you are not acquainted with any drinkers who want to recover. All right, you can tell this is written in 1939, guys, the infancy of AA, right? You can easily find some by asking a few doctors, ministers, priests, or hospitals. They will be only too glad to assist you. Don't start out as an evangelist or reformer. Unfortunately, a lot of prejudice exists. You will be handicapped if you arouse it. Ministers and doctors are competent, and you can learn much from them if you wish, but it happens that because of your own drinking experience, you can be uniquely useful to other alcoholics. So cooperate, never criticize. Woo! To be helpful is our only aim. Not to gratify my ego. Go ahead, Ash.
Yeah, there are quite a few in this paragraph. So we'll start with how do you pronounce it? Evangelist? Yes, thank you. As a person who seeks to convert others to a new faith. And then you have reformer, which is one who tries to get others to change. Prejudice, which is a preconceived opinion that is not based on reason or actual experience. Handicapped is at a disadvantage, and rouse is to excite into action.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Ashton. So I gave a little spoiler prior to this. This is what maybe Bill was a bit of an evangelist or a reformer, and he had all these, the spiritual experience that he wanted to share with every drunk that came across his path, or the ones he was trying to rip off the bar stools, right? Perhaps that's what he was doing. And he would go home and he would be just depleted and frustrated with not be able to help anyone. And Lois says, hey, Bill, guess what? You're sober. That didn't even dawn on me. But then she said, maybe you should go talk to Dr. Soakworth and see what he says. And Dr. Soakworth was real clear with him, Bill. The only thing you're really doing wrong here is you're starting out with this religious, evangelistic approach to things. Why don't you tell him what the problem is? Why don't you tell him about that? And how you found out what the problem was and what the solution is after that. And guess what? Lo and behold, cut through the chase here. He got to Dr. Bob, and he told Bob, because it was going to be a 15-minute conversation, ended up being 6 hours together with Dr. Bob, about what the problem was. And you know what? If Bill would have came to him as an evangelist, Dr. Bob would have buried him. Dr. Bob was in the expert group. He prayed, but faith without works is dead, and it just wouldn't have worked. But Bill purposely, is it odd or is it God that Dr. Silky told Bill, this is the approach that you need to have? And it's the same one I have to have here too. Don't start out as an evangelist or a reformer. That is a direction that Bill's giving us in the book through his experience. That's direction number 1, if you want to write that in your book. And prior to that, it talks about perhaps you're not acquainted, start the beginning of the paragraph. Perhaps you're not acquainted with any drinkers who want to recover. Here's an approach reference. You can easily find someone by asking a few doctors. So my job to ask, right? And I know this is written in 1939 and we don't necessarily have to do this today, but it's still an approach reference. And then it says, you'll only be too glad to assist you. Don't start out being an evangelist or reformer. So I'm not against alcohol. It's not what I'm here. I'm not here to tell you, or against cocaine. That's not what I'm trying to do here. Unfortunately, there's a lot of prejudice exists. You'll be handicapped if you arouse it. And I can see why. You know, if I'm putting it all down, I am grateful. You know why? Alcohol and cocaine at one time or another gave me a spiritual experience. It did, right? It absolutely did. But it didn't last. And I couldn't draw from it the next day. This is spiritual experience. It was short-lived. I need to have a spiritual experience that's real and lasting. That's the directions of the big book. That is the result of the 12 steps. And then back to the text, it says, you will be handicapped. You arouse it. Ministers and doctors are competent. You can learn much from them if you wish. But it happens that because of our own drinking experience, my drinking and drugging experience. Now Bill's going to start talking about what it was like, what happened, what it was like now. This is the appropriate time for me to talk about that. Not necessarily from the podium. What it was like, what happened, what it was like now for me means what it was like without God in my life. What happened when I got introduced to a power greater than myself. What it's like today to have access and availability to me, this power. But here, this is different. This is where I really share my experience of what it was like when I was drinking or drugging. And then it says you can uniquely be useful to other alcoholics. So cooperate, never criticize, be helpful is our only aim. That is my only aim, to be helpful, to be of maximum service to God and his kids. I'm not judging anybody. I forget sometimes how painful that was in the very early convalescence. Absolutely, I forget that stuff. But you know how I stay relevant to it? Working with newcomers all the time, showing up at meetings. I guess the sponsees and their job is, or uniquely is, to be welcomers at meetings, to make people feel welcome, and then to get their phone numbers. The deal here for me is not to wait for them to call me, because the window of opportunity that Howard and Kathy talk about is going to slam shut. My obligation is to help the newcomer, period, the end. And I don't know how fast that window is going to shut. I get their phone number, and I will follow up. I'm not a stalker, for Christ's sake, but I am certainly going to follow up with that phone call. And I've got to work with hundreds and hundreds of people because of that. You know, and today there's a lot of recovered alcoholics and drug addicts in their life, and I watch them get their kids back in their life. And I watch them make that border crossing in the bed with mama. And I watch them get that new career. And what I pointed out before, do the work in 1 through 9. Live in the disciplines of 10, 11, and 12. Have the spiritual awakening. And then watch the life that you're supposed to intend to have all along become true for you. Come to fruition. This is the experience that I have with God today. I have an amazing life today. I'm in love with my wife, and she's in love with me. We have kids and grandkids. I have a great career today. I have hundreds and hundreds of friends in the fellowship, Alcoholics Anonymous. My life has never looked any better. Do I want more of that? Yeah, but how am I going to get that? I got to give it all away. Every bit of it. All of it away. You know, I don't get to keep this. I have to be inconvenienced. That's okay. My Saturdays are insane. From 8:30 in the morning to about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I work with sponsees all day long, on the hour, after hour. But I choose to do that, and I love doing that. You know how I walk out of there? Like I'm walking on a cloud. To be agents of God, that blows me away. To have this availability to me, this is not something that you want to miss.
So perhaps you're not acquainted with any alcoholics who want to recover. So this is perhaps the easiest change that we see these days, right? Why do I go to meetings, right? I mean, I got to go and meet newcomers. I mean, certainly I got to go from the spirit of unity, right? So I can be among all you guys. And there's a lot of other great things that happen in meetings. You know, we teach and we learn and we practice all those things. But number one, what I get from going to meetings, especially bigger meetings, is find newcomers to work with. And you know, we're out here. We're out here. You know, David and Ashton and I in little rural Illinois, but we've got a Saturday morning AA group that's about 60 strong, which isn't bad for a little farm town that feels like it's fewer than 60 people. You know, and there's always newcomers rolling in there. Right? So it's not hard for me to find drinkers. Now, do they want to recover? We're going to sort that out once we start talking, because just because somebody shows up to an AA meeting looking for help doesn't mean they want to really recover, because by the way, they don't even know that it's an option to recover. And by the way, they don't even know that they need to recover. What are they looking for? Physical sobriety, all the external blessings like David talked about. Want to get back in the bed, back in the job, have a couple bucks in the pocket, right? The liver stop being inflamed. That's what most people are showing up for, right? I started showing up because life wasn't doing so great, you know, and I had a bunch of problems, but I wasn't looking for a spiritual awakening. I was looking for a little tone things down just a little bit, you know, and again, not even fully convinced when I came in. And I think the case for most of us. So you can easily find some by asking a few doctors, ministers, priests, hospitals, yeah, or just go to meetings. And when I talk to people, newcomers or just people that I talk to in the rooms, and they tell me, they're dragging, they're not feeling right, something's missing. I'm like, you know, first of all, I ask them, how's in those 9-step amends going? And, you know, 99 times out of 100, like, well, I've still got some. So we know that's a problem, right? And then I start talking to them a lot. How's your 10-step spot check inventory going? Well, I don't really do that. How's your morning and evening, you know, starting with God in? Well, I'm not really doing that. I'm like, all right, how many people are you sponsoring? Oh, nobody. So what are you doing? Basically, you're telling me you're not working a program of recovery. You're showing up to meetings, and by the way, you're showing up to the same meetings. How about go to some new meetings? I know, you know, this is a great recommendation I make a lot. People, oh, I'm in a rut. Okay, great. Get out of the rut. Go to a new meeting. Again, we live in the middle of nowhere, but if I'm motivated to get in the car 35 to 45 minutes, I don't know, there's probably 200 meetings a week within 45 minutes, maybe more, maybe 500. I don't know, right? Within an hour, certainly. And hell, if I go down to Chicago, there's probably 2,000 meetings a week that I could go to, right? So there's never excuse. There's never an excuse. There's plenty of reasons. Well, I'm lazy, I'm slothful, or I want to procrastinate. I'd rather complain than get better. But you're not doing this is no service to myself or anybody else in recovery, right? So they will be only too glad to assist you. Yeah, I mean, still cooperating with the professional community never hurts. My personal physician knows I'm in recovery. It's the first thing I told her when I went to see her for the first time 12 years ago when we moved out here, and she's like, "Oh, great!" She was so excited to hear I'd been sober in recovery for a long time at that point. She's like, "You know, next town over, just north of here, Hinckley's, terrible heroin problem." And I was like, "I did not know that. I just moved out here and we're in the middle of cornfields. What are you talking about, heroin problem?" And I said, "If you're allowed to, please give anybody my phone number. I'm happy to talk to them." Unfortunately, a lot of prejudice exists if we evangelize or reform. And so evangelizing, well, we know all about that. David and I are great evangelists, right? That's why we always got to catch ourselves. We get on the soapbox and start preaching, you know. Reforming, I think the way that Bill was talking about it back here, he's talking about alcohol reform, right? And again, we don't have a position on whether or not people should drink, whether or not alcohol should be illegal, the types of alcohol, none of that. We absolutely do not have a position on that. We only have a position on, oh, you would like to stop drinking, no problem. I've got a solution that I can share with you, right? And it goes on to say, so a lot of prejudice exists. If I take that approach, you'll be handicapped, and I cannot handicap myself, right? It's tough enough to work with newcomers. So I don't want to put new artificial impediments in my own way. I got to figure out how to be maximum service to God and all his kids best I can. So ministers, doctors are competent, and you can learn much from them if you wish, but it happens that most of your own drinking experience you can be uniquely useful to other alcoholics. So another great side story is we got a buddy of ours out here, John, David and I are real tight with, and he's a strong recovery, been sober a long time too, and he appreciates how we thump the book. But he has said to both of us, first time meeting a new guy, don't beat him in the side of the head with the book, and I really take that to heart. I'll sit down with the guy, like we get some instruction in the book that says, sit down, ask him some questions about his drinking, because number one, I'm supposed to qualify the guy, and then share some of my own stories with him, build some rapport. Sometimes it feels like when we go into treatment center and David and I go in and we're thundering out of the book, you can be better and da. Sometimes, and I say to these guys in treatment, I'm like, we don't get a commission if any of you guys show up to a meeting. There's no bonus plan here. Because I guarantee you, when the two sales guys are in there, that's how it comes off sometimes, right? That's not what this is about. This is about establishing a rapport so there can be a little bit of trust from probably a very frightened newcomer that says, this David guy seems okay. Yeah, I had some of those same stories. Yeah, maybe I'll go to that meeting with them, and then maybe, yeah, I'll do some of this step work, right? I'm gonna smack the guy in the side of the head with the book pretty quickly, but maybe I had established just a little bit of rapport first, right? And then the last thing, just sort of wrapping up, says, so cooperate, never criticize. To be helpful is our only aim. This is the point. I am to be helpful. To who? God's kids. Everybody who needs help. I talked about it, guys. If there's 10 million of us across all the fellowships, and again, I think I'm probably being generous with that number, and there's 800 million people that need help, right? We are really, really short. So we got to spend a lot of time being helpful.
Yeah, the only thing we're going to end up here, because first time all day I was right. I told David, I said, we're not going to get off of page 89 today. I just know we weren't. And we didn't. So, but David gave a little bit of a spoiler alert. Next page, next paragraph, instructions on how to work with another alcoholic. So come back next week. Let's dive into the book. Bill gives us some good instructions, some directions on how to do that.